Dear colleagues, in compliance with our best productive traditions, let's start on time. We are 1 minute late, but it's almost on time. I think that there are some people who are going to join us, but it's very interesting because in the session where they're discussing the results of the productivity or redistribution of the taxes and social sphere, they have a larger audience, and it shows the priorities. We are a small group, but we are very tightly knit, and it is quite obvious what is the foundation, what is the support structure. I'm Yulia Urozhaeva, and I'm the Undersecretary to the Minister of Economic Development. I'm the curator of the productivity section at the Minister of Economic Development. I want to remind you that last year we started with a small federal project when we started it with the government, and they told us, try to do something with the productivity. We tried, and we started, and the results are interesting, so interesting that they're really surprising for many people, because the productivity became the only, in fact, new national priority, which was included in the 12 national priorities. So since May, we've been living in new history. The productivity has increased. The project has increased 10 times over as far as the budget and the scope are concerned. And I want to remind you that the passports are to be developed in October. That's the deadline. And now the ministry, many of my colleagues, they have sleepless nights because they want to formulate the passport of the national project. That will be our guidance in the future. Our session, and I think this is the goal, I just want to say that it has been discussed very actively on the very top of our government, but our small group needs to speak about what defines productivity, what are the barriers, and I'm going to ask specific questions and outline specific issues later on. But with utmost responsibility, I want to say that the results of our discussion today, the acceptance of these results and conclusions will become part of the passport of the national project. So I'm very grateful to the participants and to the colleagues who are here in the auditorium. So allow me to introduce the speakers, because this is our leading force. Of course, I'll start with I start from right to left. Mikhail Magrinov, partner at Pricewaterhouse, our advisor. On the one hand, this person is used to be part of the management of the major company. He has experience in working with Russian companies, and he helped a lot in development of the program. Then Sergei Kolesnikov, who is the president of the Technical Corporation, and I want to underscore that Technical became one of the major partners, one of the first partners. We're very grateful to the colleagues because, first of all, they show tremendous just great experience, and when the company shows those results, it's just ideal for the Russian environment, and they're helping us in several areas, helping to develop productivity, working with companies. Then Dmitry Lomovtsev, who is the Minister of Industry of Tula area. They became the first pilot project. A lot of people started with asking why do we need it? And after Dmitry, there is Alexei Prasnyshy, who is the partner Strategy Partners Group. This is the company who is sort of like the leader in productivity, and the solutions that they implement in various areas are state of the art. Then Maxim Pokushenko, who is excuse me, he is the Minister of Economic Development of Rostov Oblast. Very interesting developments there. Maxim kept asking, what kind of program is that? What are you going to do in it? But when they started, they are now in full progress. And technical company, by the way, also worked in the Rostov Oblast, supported by the Productivity Center of Rosatom. We're very grateful to Rosatom because Rosatom also was one of our first partners. And finally, Nikolai Solomon, and this is our gift from Rosatom because he used to head the financial department of Rosatom. I think he's been with us forever, but actually only since March, and he is the director of the Federal Center of Competencies in Labor Productivity. This is the center, which is the targeted center for this activity. This is the wonderful panel that we have today, and your greetings, please. In order to start the discussion, we would like to propose the following format. It's very interesting for us to sort of evaluate whether our estimations of productivity are good. So please download the application. It's in Apple Store, MFF, and so on. This is the code of this questionnaire is 1620. So there are 7 questions there. When you punch this code, you'll see the questions. There are 7 questions, and there are numbers. And please be honest, because the results are going to be used in development of the national passport. And at the same time, we're going to check our digital capabilities, how you can download the application. So the first question is, productivity of labor in Russia is comparable with US and Holland, Chile and Latvia, Finland and Canada, Nigeria and Angola. So we are comparable to 100%. We are comparable to the USA and Holland, the Netherlands. So Michael, you correct the joke. People sitting in the panel also need to vote. Okay, now it's 50-50. USA and Holland, Chile and Latvia. Don't be shy, colleagues. You know, it's not an international activity. It's just about numbers. Okay, the numbers are changing. There are pessimists comparing Russia to Nigeria and Angola. Now, the second question is, okay, we have the vote for the first one. The results are very interesting because the majority showed the correct answer. We really very close to Chile and Latvia, $25 per hour. In the U.S. and Holland, it's 50. Nigeria and Angola, that's too pessimistic, really. So what is the industry with the highest productivity in Russia? It's, yes, oil and gas, that is correct. I would say that it's the highest in productivity and in added value. Then what do we have next? What is the motivation? The increase of profit and revenue. Yeah, that's quite natural, but it doesn't work all the time, and we're going to speak about it. Then the next question is, the leading enterprises in Russia could increase productivity by percentage. Sorry, it's just jumping on the screen. So, and what needs to be done to increase the productivity? What we are lacking? Japanese methods or the working culture? Great example, because I think the result is 58%, and that's what we're thinking in the project. Retraining of the personnel. I think we got very interesting results. Thank you very much, colleagues. Now let's switch to the slides that I wanted to show you. And if the speakers during their presentations would like to refer to the numbers that were the results of the questionnaire, they're welcome. Now, what I would like to do next, let's speak about the following. In developing the project, we discovered some mystery in Russian productivity, and we wanted to show it schematically. So we only have half of the productivity in the U.S. and in Europe, so the foundation is very low. What do we know from physics and mathematics? It's very easy to start from a lower base. Now, all our experts and partners in the Federal Center of Competences, they come to enterprises, and using easiest instruments, they increase the productivity by 30%. So you can also increase the profits and revenue in the same way, the same 30%. So everyone, of course, needs to be interested in raising productivity. And the third thing, which was interesting, we looked at the domestic sales, foreign sales, and we discovered that whenever a company wants to export something, even if they want to sell in the domestic market, they may go to an exhibition, and they may increase the annual volume of orders twofold. It's very easy, 2.5% on the screen. That's from 400,000 companies that have some added value. 10,000 are exported, regularly exported. So when the company wants to export, they can do it. And it's a mystery, actually. Why don't they increase productivity in these conditions? We've been thinking probably we are trying to work with the wrong puzzle. Probably we don't have all the pieces for the puzzle, because we have really very good elements, but the puzzle doesn't work out. So I would like to have discussion on the three topics, three elements, if you wish, in the puzzle, because in the puzzle you need some key areas, and then all the picture is easily assembled. So the key elements in this puzzle are what motivates the companies, what are the limitations, the markets, the personnel, occupations on, and what are the supportive activities, supporting events. So if you have something that you want to add, you can please, you're welcome to do it. What motivates the companies? That's easy in the textbooks of economics. You can find it. Why doesn't it happen? What motivates the companies to increase the productivity? What are the tools? What is the infrastructure? What are the incentives? Or probably the reverse side of the medal. Why it doesn't happen? taking into consideration all the conditions that I've already outlined. The second one, the other side of the medal, of course, what are the limitations? What hinders the increase? We've been asking from the regions and companies, and a lot of answers were professional personnel competencies. And are we talking about the workers in the companies or the competences of the experts, the management of the companies? What hinders this? Probably we just need to remove one stumbling block and everything will be fine. And of course, the supportive events, one of the theories is that we were told the most complex task in raising productivity is the infrastructure of the labor market. Of course, it is all about people. It's very difficult to retrain, to relocate. That's why without the infrastructure, we cannot do it. So these three topics, I would like to discuss all three of them, and I'm going to finish my introduction. And I'm becoming just a strict moderator, and so on. 5 to 7 minutes for a presentation. Then questions, my questions, your questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So the procedure is as followed. We have Ruben Nikopolov. Sorry, I forgot about him. He is director of the New Economic School, and he is one of the leading Russian economists, and he is directly involved in political economy issues. So let's start with the economic series. Ruben, what do we need to take into account in our project? From the latest research insights. Good morning. I just want to say a few words how the science treats productivity. And of course, it goes without saying, there is a huge international experience. We know what factors impact productivity, and in this way, we offer a program which is consistent with the international experience, with what we usually understand when we speak about productivity is the machinery, it's the tools and so on. This is, of course, very important, but also intangible assets are also important. The management experience, managerial experience is very important. And here, Russia is a very good example because all the macro parameters, we are just an example for everybody in the world, but the productivity is 2 times lower than in the developed countries. And it is the evidence of the fact that we need to look for the problems at the micro level. We need to look at the key indicators, key factors, key components, and one of the most important things, which was mentioned in all the international research, is the incentives for owners, managers, and for the workers are very important.
From the point of view of the stimuli of the owners of the companies, the key factor is the property right. From the point of view of management, it's important to solve the issues of corporate government. From the point of view of personnel, it's important to build the management inside the company and to give motivation. Apart from that, issues related to employment market are also very important because the experience of other countries shows that the implementation of technologies increasing the productivity are blocked by the personnel that are scared that those new technologies will oust them out of their profession and they will lose their job. And in a situation when they're afraid that they will lose their job And in case they are safe that they will later on be retrained and given a new job with higher salary, in this situation, they can consciously sabotage the adoption of new technologies. So the issues of stimuli at all the levels are crucial. Apart from that, the information itself is very important. The information about the methods, about the technologies that might work in the given context. Because the managing technologies and the cultures of management, some of them might work well in some contexts, whereas they can fail in others. What is good for one country with a certain administrative setting might fail in other country because of some basic reasons. So this is also very important, and we cannot ignore human capital, human asset, because this is very important, starting from personnel at the places and finally ending with owners and so on and so forth. And the better the owners are organized, the better their companies work. That is why human assets are very important at all the stages. And finally, what factors can influence the productivity and how can we influence the productivity? In this regard, we have vast expertise in terms of transfer of best practices between the companies. And here the most evident factors that have long before been established is the transfer of best practices via direct investment of productive companies when they invest in less productive companies. This shows itself at the level of international direct investment. It leads to increased labor productivity as well. And this is true not only for international investment, but for international trade as well. We have talked about export that stimulates productivity. There are researches that show that if you invest in countries with high level of productivity, then best practices will transfer and the productivity itself will grow. That is why at trade and at investment between various companies, these factors play a crucial role. Global expertise shows that all the possible practices that are aimed at increasing productivity are highly dependent on local context. And what works for some countries can fail in other. Here we are in a precarious situation because there are few good researchers and surveys of what might actually work in Russia. And what sort of research and survey do we talk about? High segment surveys, high quality surveys that can show what exact factors well established in other countries could also work in Russia. Russia has good surveys showing that direct investment from productive companies increase productivity in Russia as well. However, that is probably all we know from the international experience that can help us increase our own productivity. And actually, not all the best practices can be very effective in Russia. Have a look at a couple of examples, what is good for other countries. For example, in India, there was a good experiment, and I underscore that this was only an experiment out of some medium-sized companies. Part of them became participants of a program organized by a very successful consulting company about the managing practices, and they were taught how to organize their managing and business processes. And as a result, over 1 year, the productivity was increased by 17%. And the companies to participate in this program were chosen randomly. That is why we may say for sure that because of this management enhancement program, their productivity grew. At any rate, in India, it was very positive because 17% is very essential. Sometimes it shows that banal things and practices might work out. For example, in China, it was proven that if entrepreneurs of small and medium-sized businesses are joined by social networks and are forced to communicate on a daily basis, this communication alone, this communication between various entrepreneurs, can increase the productivity by 8%. Well, funny as it may seem, just talk to each other, but it really worked. And finally, a methodological idea from the point of view of research. We do little about what works and what does not work. That is why it's important to be adequate while evaluating and assessing the approaches and methods that work and that do not work. In this regard, it is vital to spontaneously check various projects and different regions in different cities and in different companies within those regions, and after that the results are compared. Only this sort of check can work because it will show what practices should be adopted at the national level and what practices should be abandoned. I mean the implementation of pilot projects for pilot companies. It is important to evaluate the efficiency of those programs, but pilot companies and pilot regions are generally either the best or the worst companies and regions. That is why if you implement a program for them and all of a sudden it works, then you should not be surprised when you try the same program for absolutely different company and it fails. Same goes for regions. That is why when we talk about effective expenditure of state funds, it is crucial to be adequate when evaluating the efficiency of separate interventions in order to pick up the best, the most efficient, and to scale them up later on. Thank you so much. I think this is very interesting, and probably we have to spend all our resources to bring the managers together and to make them talk to each other, because 8% is very good statistical figure. One of the most recent comments that we have to hear are that you point out the best and the most efficient companies and they could succeed without your assistance, and now they have done it with your assistance. So the issue really is how to evaluate the efficiency of those programs, taking into account the specifics of Russian mentality, of Russian approach to many of productional processes, because it's only now that we start to understand the role of this process in various aspects. You have vast expertise, and what is your take? What should we do? What should we implement, and what can cause the motivation and the incentives, and why do the companies that have an intact ideal macro landscape, why do they fail to increase productivity? Thank you so much. As for the incentives and as for the motivation, I got to hear about the Stacked River, and I'd like to start with the fact that our expectations about some programs or some processes are built in line because over tens and thousands of years, we people have been used to think in lines. But the thing is that such aspects are developing exponentially. They do not develop in line. And in this regard, the speed will be increasing exponentially. And what is slow at the beginning is absolutely all right, because judging by my own expertise from Rostelecom, judging by my consultant expertise, you start from some minor things and later on it grows on. That's for one thing. Another framework I'd like to mention, taking into account what has been said here over the recent 15 minutes, is structuring of our approach to tackle such issues. Because one of the structures that we use is informing incentives or motivation and alleviation of restrictions. This is a positive checklist, because we have to understand that all that have to be engaged are well informed, that they see and feel their motivation and they face no limitations. As for the incentives, I'd like to agree with my colleagues only partly. Really, pilot projects are not always representational, because they might take the results from the higher base, which would be better than the results from the lower base, and in any case, those results will not be representative. And we will be upset because we will be afraid that we have taken the wrong approach, but it is not so. The thing is that the increase in productivity should not be 17% or 40%. The task is just to kick that ball rolling, to free our river and to let the water move freely in it. And the expertise of cooperating with a federal organization of the highest segment or of cooperation with various companies, all these are just pilots. However, when talking about productivity, we have to have a look at cross-functional tasks that we have. For example, increase of productivity in what regards the United Service Center, in what regards the optimization of maintenance and repairing, and why companies do not do it now. They do it on their own, but they do not communicate with other companies in this regard. They do not exchange their expertise. But our colleagues from Televirus here, from Business Russia, say that they do not trust us as government, they do not trust those maintenance centers, because they could trust them with their accounts and later on find out that they were sold for the black market. Here I'm talking about the rule of 5 whys, and what is the next why? We do see that they are the best practices, but we do not see that they are shared between companies. As for federal companies, which are quite numerous in Russia, it's sufficient for them to make the first step, which is the domestic maintenance center. The second step here would be automatization, robotization. If we make this a constant process, it means that out of all the processes that our company deals with from year to year, we point out the processes that we automate and trust to outsource specialists. There are really such well-educated regions where this outsource is possible, and this will mean a breakthrough in terms of productivity. That is why here we need a package decision, a cross-sectoral package decision, for example, repayment payments or something like this. We have to accelerate this process to shoot videos with financial directors, with CEOs of companies that deal with it. We have to make it more popular, and in parallel with it, to work with CEOs of financial enterprises, where we have to improve, where we want to improve it. This is the sketch, the outline of ideas that might be important. Another issue is the model of changes. First pilot enterprises, then directors of departments and of divisions that used to be actively engaged in the framework of their industries being sponsored by federal government. If they go to their college enterprises, they will be trusted. People will trust them rather than just people or consultants coming from center, from Moscow. This is just an idea, but this idea should be incorporated in the general information framework. This is about reaching out for directors, for CEOs, and this is about the productivity growth of 30 to 50% in various sectors. And this results, this increases should be explained, should be made popular for a wide audience, and finally all the limits and barriers should be lifted. Now I'd like to say a couple of words about the aspects of productivity increase program. We talk about productivity, however, we do not have to forget about the fact that increasing productivity is only one part of an equation that leads to general success. Apart from that, there are such things as markets, the quality of promotion, there are other A's, B's, C, D elements, and in case any of those elements equals 0, the whole equation equals 0, and we fail. That is why, if we do not know to whom we finally market our goods and services, our increase in productivity will mean nothing. That is why I believe that the advantage of this movement is the fact that we accumulate data about a vast amount of enterprises. On the basis of it, we build the chains of added value, and in the framework of those chains, we will understand where do we have potential and capacity for import substitution, for example, because sometimes we buy details in the West, then get them back to Russia, then get them back to the West to maintain it, to incorporate it in a larger equipment. And in order to escape this, digitalization and the usage of the latest technologies is very important. You have 1 minute left. Thank you. We talk about the programs that we understand. We talk about the things related to changing incentives and motivation programs. I believe that many of those aspects produce incremental results. We have the experience of implementing projects with the help of technologies of data analytics, Internet of Things, robotization, where we can increase productivity by dozens of %. And this is a revolutionary approach juxtaposed to incremental approach that we got used to over the recent decades. That is why my proposal is very simple. Colleagues, let us motivate, give impetus to companies to increase their productivity by incorporating elements of latest technologies. And the data analysis is quite an easy matter. The more participants we have, the more participants will be interested to connect, to receive feedback from all the other participants of the program. And the Last thing I'd like to mention, in consulting we use a majority of approaches to increase productivity, which is the motivation of personnel, optimization of models, blueprints, and so on and so forth. But I'd like to underscore that the implementation of latest technologies already gives results. The recent projects that we accomplished, IoT for servicemen and maintenance workers, automatization of debts, robotization of united maintenance centers. This is what we cannot let go.
Thank you very much, Mikhail. It's very interesting because we've been discussing digitalization for a long time, and now we see the truth. Because all of us officials, academicians, consultants, but there is a person among us who managed to create one of the, probably even the most productive company in Russia. And they're very successful in their export. They have enterprises here, domestically and abroad. So, Sergey, you are the person who can tell us what works, what doesn't, and what works in practice. Thank you very much for this introduction. Of course, that's a lot of praise. Usually, I have a presentation for 25 minutes. Now I only have 10 minutes, so I'll just skip through the slides. My colleague from Price Waterhouse has already mentioned something. Some methods have already been described. And excuse me, after my presentation, I need to go to the Federal Monopoly Agency because we are discussing some legal issues, some legislative issues, and I need to defend the position of the business community of Russia in developing the new law. I was lucky to visit Japan, Toyota, and at the Lexus plant, the CEO showed us around, and I asked him, what are the Toyota tools that impact your productivity better? And he said, Jidoka. Jidoka is the quality which is inbuilt in the process, and reading about it, we understand that it's Odon, it's the quality control, it's part of the culture of production, because you cannot make products which don't have high quality. It's not easily implementable. And of course, this is an issue which is closely related to maintenance and repairs, and we pay a lot of attention to it. Some of our business departments use it, counting the capabilities and the working hours that depends on the overall effectiveness of the use of machinery. This is one of the elements of enhancing productivity. We use robotics. We not only use robotics for production, but also for quality control. So if the machine is not in compliance with the quality parameters, then they call, it stops and call the maintenance operator. This is really very important. Of course, the quality of personnel, training, productive culture, rotation of personnel, and the through control from acceptance of the material to the finished product. We are involved in roofing and insulation materials. And in every industry, they have their own approaches and their own set of tools, which is basic for this particular industry. And of course, yakipoki in Japanese, or the eras. Because, for instance, I was looking at the process of assembly of the sensors in Japan, and if the operator doesn't take the correct element, then the machine stops the operator in order to avoid an error. How can we switch the slides? So this is our company. We've been in the market for 25 years. I'm the owner. and I'm involved in the management, directly involved in the management of the company. This is our revenue. We export in all those in 95 countries, and we have increased export by 20%. We have lots of products that we make, large assortment, and we have 23 plants, different products, different roofings, different insulation materials. So the company is built on technological principle. We are rather flat in our hierarchy, and the philosophy of the company structure is that one business unit has, well, similar type technologies. Of course, in our practice, we use the cutting-edge technologies, mostly the tools and machinery made in Europe, in the US, very few pieces of Russian equipment, unfortunately. We had a breakthrough using these technologies, and at the first stage, we're just repeating the movement of the foreign workers. Then we sort of digest it, and after 2 or 3 years of operating the machinery, we usually change the technologies, customize it for the clients. So, for instance, this is the structure of our company. It resembles a house, and this is a very good example. And you can see the foundation and so on, because everyone knows what a house is. So the foundation is our growth of loyalty of our customers, the regime of production, and the client is number one forever. Of course, we take into account clients' preferences. We have feedback from the clients, and we do not lose connection with the clients. We have for instance, 50,000 shipments and 20,000 responses. Even if our truck is an hour or very seldom a day late, of course, they complain. And this is a simple process, but it required a lot of automation, this process, because right now everything is automated, humans are not involved. You just fill out the documents, and of course there are certain tools that we use. We have orders, and of course I can discuss all the processes in detail for a long time, and probably each tool needs at least a 5-minute description, but we don't have time right now. We measure the number of orders. This is the key indicators of the activity, and about 70% of all the orders are fulfilled within the first 3 days. We work with our clients, salespeople, designers, and you know, all these mechanisms, they are described in literature. So 3 years before the sale, we start working with the general designers, with the developers, and that's the business process that you can see on this chart. And then we move towards sales and post-sale maintenance, post-sale services. Of course, we have the centralized maintenance centers, we have the centralized call centers, and we have the clients service center, 350,000 orders, and you can calculate how many shipments a day. Most of the orders are received through web services. All the customers have their personal accounts. They can monitor the history of all their orders. Then the master of shipments, we can, for instance, load a lot of orders on the same truck, and of course keeping in compliance with the road load legislation, because you know that if the total weight is larger than the regulations prescribe, we'll have a large fine. Of course, we use electronic signatures for our document turnover, and we process the documents very quickly. It's like 160 documents against 20 to 30 documents back in 1980. Another philosophy of the company is we have a large scope of activity, and we try to use this large scope in our favor. We have a very high productivity, probably one of the most productive companies in Europe, and of course, taking into account even the Far Eastern markets, it's probably impossible to have the same production because they have 6 million of population, and the market in the Far East is different from the central part of Russia. What are the tools that we're using? Of course, we already mentioned the maintenance and repairs automation and budgeting, of course. Everyone does it, automation. And it goes without saying that we use good discounts when we are buying something from Sibur Rosneft, because we are good clients of these companies, and that also affects the efficiency of the company because the production costs are lower. Of course, we boast because we have very low churn of personnel, like 4.5% last year, and most of them left because they retired or, for instance, took a maternity leave. People don't leave the company very often. We lay off personnel. They are involved, they're interested. 82% of engagement of our personnel. Of course, you may argue about the methodology of evaluation, but we have a very good indicator of involvement of personnel in Russia. Of course, we work with all the productive proposals. Of course, every second proposal is about labor safety, and we seriously consider safety, and these safety indicators are really good. The technologies, the labor safety are very high, but you know, the culture of production leaves much to be desired, unfortunately. In spite of all the technologies and in all the training courses, people are don't want to be responsible for other people, but we have already introduced a program, 365 days without a single accident, and that's an incentive, that's a promotion. But people don't want to be mutually responsible. Unfortunately, this is the cultural element of our Russian culture, because we don't see it in Italy or in other countries. People watch after each other. Now you can see the use of robots. The easiest when we buy an enterprise, you see that we lay off all the personnel involved in loading, unloading. We use robots. And of course, if, for instance, there is personnel with a vast experience in sales, and so we use the experience. We are a highly IT-dependent company. We use a lot of IT programs because the technology of maintenance, for instance, and repairs is key. We use enterprise asset management. This is a very complex IT program because there are more than 5 nodes in this system, and of course regulation, information system, and of course the approach to normative regulations and to maintenance and so on. We have reduced the number of maintenance hours because of this program, and we want to approach the number of 8,000 hours, which is a very good indicator. Now we want to do some repairs. We want to outsource some of the repairs because a lot of activities can be done without stopping the line, and we're trying to move the repairs and the quality of repairs into diagnostics and planning of repairs in order not to shut down the line, even scheduled repairs shutdowns. And of course, it goes without saying that in, for instance, in aviation with aircraft, the requirements are most stringent. We have the structure of planning up to 5 years. We, for instance, schedule our sales for 12 months, and every day we see our sales plan for 12 months, then strategic planning for 5 years, but it's not a digital plan. We don't use numbers. We just point out either the geography or products or technology. For instance, for the next 5 years, we're going to focus on this region or on this product. It's very difficult to think of numbers because a lot of things change. But we've started it in. We've been doing it for 8 years, since 2010, and you can see how these plans are implemented. And we see that, for instance, back in 2012, 2014, our projections were quite different from the reality, but still we need to do it because it's very important. We need to also break down the roles and the numbers. The numbers show that you should have 5-year plans without any numbers. Now we were talking about our dynamic development, and this is the ratio of using the machinery. We use, for instance, if something would break down, we are looking for the proper maintenance personnel, and they know how much time they need for it because they have all the spare parts in every on appropriate shelves. And we used to have only one person who knew the location of all the spare parts. Right now, everyone knows definitely where the spare parts are to be found. They are tied up to a certain kind of machinery. Some of the ball bearing mechanisms can be used in, for instance, 5 different instruments, but the person who mixed up the code so that they couldn't find it, that causes us to lose a lot of time.
Well, the shelves have to be marked, and you do not need that much time to get this or that part of equipment. You have the label, you have the number, you go to the dispatchment area, and now it takes, let us say, 2 or 3 minutes. Earlier, it used to occupy several hours. Then we accomplished some planned maintenance works. We have a plan, a schedule, and we focus on inspection, on diagnostics of our equipment. For example, if a roller bearing is does not work properly, you can predict that in some time it will break down completely, whereas a more complicated equipment, for example electronics, is much more complicated. It just breaks down instantaneously, and in order to prevent it you have to establish positive climate control and so on and so forth. This is on the picture you can see parts of our working areas and informational tables and stands that are actual for each and every shift. Then the decrease in delivery terms. We wanted to proceed from 20 minutes to 2 hours, and now the adjustment of color does not take any time, absolutely, well, probably 2 or 3 minutes. I wonder if you have seen the Formula 1 car races when they changed the wheels for a bullet in 3 to 6 seconds. I have seen by myself how it is done in less promoted areas, and it might take up to 40 minutes. This should not be the case. If you develop best practices and if your servicemen repeat after you, they might enhance and increase their productivity in this issue, and ultimately they can be successful and do this within several seconds, just like Formula 1 mechanics do it. The company sets goals to enhance quality. However, no matter what goals you set, there is always space for improvement, because the more you know, the more you need to do, and the bigger is your contact with things and ideas that you have no knowledge about. That is why the improvement process goes on non-stop. We have several thousands of promotions to increase our productivity and capacity. Some of them have to do with security, others have to do with the processes that people accomplish on their working places. We ask our personnel to contact their managers, to contact me, not to contact the government of the country, not to write to Mr. Putin, to increase their salary by several $1,000 or something like this. They have to contact their management in what concerns the processes that they accomplish at their working places, and what is the basis for the economical assessment. We do not assess about 85% of them because it does not make any sense. However, we have contents for best promotions, for best proposals to improve productivity. However, the majority of proposals do not need to be assessed, not need to be evaluated. We just try to listen to them. And once a year, we assess the best business divisions, and the best and top 3 proposals get bonuses and prizes. We do not think that it is rational to assess each and every proposal in this regard, because the massive effect is one of the key elements. Here you will try to constantly increase your capacity, for example, to optimize your expenditures for raw material, or to increase security or quality. This is a non-stop and ongoing process, same way as you brush your teeth every morning you wake up. Out of several thousands of deliveries, we have some issues where we drop behind, and on the basis of it, some people might think that we are not efficient, which is not so, because out of more than 300,000 deliveries, 200,000 are not as qualitative as we want them to be. However, the flaws that we have makes it possible for us to increase our cooperation with transportation companies, with wrapping companies. our system does not base on logistics managers. All the tariffs for all the countries are automated. 60% of them are processed by robots. If a company refuses several proposals, they get less and less of our commissions later on. For example, if we have managers for all of those divisions, in course of time they will be more loyal to a given company. That is why we try to avoid it and to keep our tariff schedule updated and modernized. What is related to logistics, twice a month the roads are closed, which has results on our efficiency, and we have to build our plans and programs on the basis of this assertion. Well, I understand that I'm taking too much time and I can deliver a whole lecture about it. Yes, this is very interesting, but all the workers of our ministry and all the people who visited your enterprises were very impressed by them. And just one question before you depart. After your story, one might want to just wrap this session up, go back to their enterprises and try to incorporate the frameworks and the schemes that you were talking about. However, why don't companies do it? Why don't they teach their servicemen to change wheels in course of several seconds? Why don't they take up this positive enterprise? I love the phrase. Survival is not your necessary task. I used to work with a company that actually said that I might turn out to be a bankrupt, and starting from 2008 I had to seriously deal with issues of increase in productivity, and we got so deep into it that we nearly escaped the crisis of 2014, and we were absolutely adapted to the Russian market, and we could switch over to export. Same story happened with Toyota company that survived a harsh crisis. However, the major developments and the improvements in the company started with this very crisis. So this is another good opportunity. Thank you so much. I believe that an important story for national project is not only working with barriers, but working with fear, so to speak. I have a question for Mr. Lomovtsev. What is the experience of Tula Oblast? How do you create this suspense and this fear? What should be done in order to develop such companies as Mr. Kolesnikov talked about? Well, I might say that I here represent a cheap region with good education. Thank you for this sort of advertising. We engaged in a project with increasing productivity, and the level of education at Tula State University made it possible for us to establish courses of lean productivity, and in the framework of this course we educate about 1,200 people. Apart from that, postgraduate studies, and actually I'm a graduate of one of those programs. That is why I feel obliged to remind you about the scientific organization of labor that used to exist back in the Soviet times and that might teach us how to work with productivity. And no matter how dependent we are on international expertise, still there are two divisions, investment and operational divisions, to increase labor productivity, and all my colleagues talked about operational resources to increase labor productivity. However, I believe that the issue of investment is very important, because to increase productivity by 8 or 20% is what we can do by all means. What are we going to do in 5 or 10 years when workplaces are optimized and we will need to switch over to latest technologies to invest? We will face the issue of lack of long-term funds. This problem has existed for some time already, and it is still there. That is why the subsidized conditions that one might expect, as, for example, in affordable loans that are given to the participants of a program of increasing labor productivity. I believe this is important in this regard, and we started to participate in this program. We said that next year we'll have minimal stakes at the foundation of industry development, and that our participants will have an opportunity for refinancing of their credit loan portfolios that will make it possible to refinance their operational activities and to deal with investment. All in all, within the framework of our original program, we have 13 enterprises, and we're very proud about 2 of them that are acting as mentors, CA and Knauf companies. CA are owners of Libres, Zeva brands, and in Tula Oblast, this company has founded 2 of the biggest investment platforms, and the volume of investment stands for tens of millions of rubles. And the second company is Knauf company, which owns one of the biggest mines in Tula Oblast, and it shows positive result of increasing productivity, which is in average 20% better than generally in the world. And the engineers and managers of Knauf company have been occupying the best offices of Knauf divisions in Latin America and in Europe. When we asked Knauf company, what do you need in order to even more enhance your labor productivity, we found out that the most important thing was to build a road around Novomoskovsk town, where the production of the company is located, because they needed to deliver products for their chain supermarkets, and it was possible only to transport their products by roads. That is why they needed more roads, and they developed a special project for that. We do hope that soon this project will be implemented and labor productivity will increase further on. So this is it. The factors that influence labor productivity are very diverse, and our actions should be based on individual approach. When we worked with those 13 enterprises and tried to make them participate in this program, this is the individual approach that helped us engage them in the program. We reached out for the owners of those companies, and this is the most important part of our work, because if the owner of the company does not want to participate in it, generally the company will refuse, it will abstain and just say that they do not have sufficient loan resources. They will invent many arguments, many ideas, and this is where we have to demonstrate that this is really a success story. At the initial stage, it was really Knauf and CA, where we showed the way the latest European equipment works, because this equipment does not have any analogs worldwide. And the enterprises naturally wanted to implement the same practice at their own productions, and their expertise was with industry branches that probably did not have that efficient technology and equipment, but that wanted to participate. They represented chemistry and steel industry. Each and every enterprise has their own success story. For example, Aerosol Novomoskovsk company had multiple opportunities, and the program made it possible for them to distribute the load for the major production line. They consulted with specialists and with experts from Rosatom, and thanks to it, they had an opportunity to show best results, and now in the framework of our program, Aerosol Novomoskovsk shows the best result out of all the others. We tried to optimize working processes at the workplaces, and actually we tidied up the major territory of enterprise. The second company was Palermo, and as a matter of fact, this company was already amidst the process of optimization. However, when we looked deeper into it, we understood that optimization of business processes and of working places. I am so sorry that everyone wants now to explain each and every detail of their production, but we are so much pressed for time. And you talked about the ways of financing, but here is a question. The company Knauf and the other company that you talked about, what does motivate them to be active in this program, to assist you in this program, and to invite experts from other companies? And it seems that Aerosol is the next company to join this process because they wanted to, and we know it. What might be done in order to attract even more partner companies and make them exchange their expertise? Because it was already said that if they talk about the processes that they incorporate, they enhance their productivity. Well, if we talk about the status of a program and about attracting new participants, I believe that we do not pay sufficient attention to medium-sized businesses. And at the regional level, we have bids of about 24 of companies that wanted to participate in the program. However, their revenue indexes do not make it possible for them to become part of this regional program. The presence of mentors of CA and Knauf means that they do not want money from us. They want us to help them develop infrastructure, to help them cooperate with government, and this program makes it possible for them to talk to other companies, to talk to the government of the Tula region, and to disclose how they could optimize their business processes. And finally, many enterprises have complex corporate structure and their branches are located in various regions of Russia. That is why we have to update our program and let it attract regional branches of companies to participate in the program. Because the program in Tula now attracted the company EEC Holding. However, we cannot yet sign an agreement with them because their representation in Tula Oblast is just a branch of a company.
And when we're talking about the support, we're not only talking about investments, that goes without saying, number one, but also we need to talk about the priority projects in infrastructure. There are some enterprises involved in the productivity program, but they need the additional incentives. Yes, we've been hearing about these comments and going downwards and raising from the bottom. Alexei, you have a vast experience of development and implementation of regional programs. The first program ever in Tatarstan. You were the author of this productivity program. It was one of the most successful. So how can you combine with what Dmitry said and Sergei said and Ruben offers? So, and how can we actually expedite the process? Thank you very much, Yulia. I'm going to be flexible without any slides. My presentation will be just my reaction to the above heard. It's really, this forum is really a very good opportunity to summarize and make conclusions. In the last 10 years, we've been involved in increasing productivity from both sides, the state sector and the companies, the private companies, and that's why we can look at the picture from both sides. Productivity of the companies, we've been talking about it for a long time today, and the set of tools to enhance the productivity is more or less standard. You can read it in the textbooks. So the key issue is why the companies, countries, regions are not using these tools. That's why I think that in this respect, there is another question. In this formula of success, everything that is related to the companies, probably it's not all the ingredients that we need to increase the productivity. That's why our experience, and I wanted to dwell on it in more detail, at least 50% of the drivers and the causes enhancing the productivity, they are not inside the company but outside, and we need to pay attention to this. We are looking at this situation from the point of view of our specific experience at the level of the countries and regions, but also we are a research institute and we have some large-scope research of our own of these drivers, among others for the World Bank. And it shows that about 50% of the causes why the company is not productive is outside of the company. So the first conclusion, based on our experience, is that we consider that this is a systemic problem which needs to be addressed comprehensively. Otherwise, it would have been very easy and all the countries would have been very prosperous without any fundamental differences. So our experience shows that there are at least 5 external problems which are obstacles. The first one, probably it's a paradox, it's competition of the institutions. How can we eliminate the competition? No, the stronger competition, the better developed institutions, I would say. If you compare, for instance, the regions among themselves, but this is a very important factor affecting productivity. And Sergei spent some of his personal times not on enhancing the productivity of his company, but on trying to equalize the competition in the external market. And another very important factor is the accessibility of funding. Well, that's a very easy conclusion, of course, but when we were doing the research for the World Bank, it showed that the accessibility of financing in Russia is really the lowest level in Europe. Without solving this problem, we cannot enhance productivity. And the third aspect is everything that relates to human resources, the professional qualifications and so on. Of course, Russia is rich in talents, but if you ask any company, and you know we've been questioning thousands of companies, but human resources is number one. Yes, even, in our question, in our small discussion, the human resources was named as one of the problems. And the final aspect is infrastructure. The infrastructure, because when you start looking at the productivity problems, you see a lot of external factors, logistics, roads, and you always stumble over it. What is the level that it needs to be resolved? Why Dmitry, and Dmitry is the government, of course, they have all the authority in the region, and its taxation bases and so on. Of course, the Minister of Economic Development is in charge of everything, including the economic growth factors and so on. This is our priority, and the productivity increase. But how can you correctly build the work in the region? What are the tools that you need, Dmitry, or what tools can you give to Dmitry? Give us money to build roads. Several billion rubles, which we don't have in our regional budget. And I think that the Tula colleagues will support me. Yeah, this is the key thing that we've been discussing, the productivity of the system, and we don't have any simple solution, unfortunately. That's why some people find these systemic solutions, and then we need partnership and trust. Our experience, unfortunately, shows that the most successful examples are where the region has the comprehensive infrastructure and can resolve it in partnership. Of course, the first one is the companies, but the role of the company, that's understandable. They need to launch lean technologies. If they are at the very start, they need to conquer the markets and so on, but they need digitalization. But the second important role in the world and in Russia, and this is associations or communities and so on. And the role of Russia is very low right now, but communities and associations help to find collective solutions. So probably the integration of your program, development of the clusters, where the cluster organizations are going to play a very important role in resolving systemic problems. And regional administration, because our experience shows that they should look at the problem of productivity in a broader way. Those who are successful, Tatarstan and others, is where their comprehensive infrastructure, then productivity, they need to have a team, and together with the Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Economic and so on. Maxim, I going to set up a Ministry of Infrastructure in Rostov area. And finally, this is the role of the universities. So the key word is partnership, trust, because if you're only working at the level of the companies, you won't achieve large progress. It's very difficult to find. And of course, you need patience, then productivity. As we see it, we see a lot of problems in the Russian regions and other countries when we expect results within 1 or 2 years, and if you don't see the results, you just drop this idea, start doing something else. But if you look at the Japan experience, they launched their productivity program in 1955. So they've been working very patiently on it in Malaysia in 1990s, in Kazakhstan in 2010. In Russia, we're just launching these productivity programs. We need to wait for 3 to 5 years, and we need to continue working on this program. We don't drop it, don't stop it. Oh, that's really a very great idea, and I wish you could talk to it to some other people. Patience, partnership, and money, and this is really right from the Bible, I think. We are a little bit late in our discussion. I understand that this is the third, the patience is already at its end, but let's spend another 10 minutes to wrap up this session, because I would like to have it really briefly, but I would like to I would like to listen to Maxim, another region with which is low cost human resources region. Probably you have some interesting partnership histories, and probably very, very briefly what works out, what doesn't. Thank you, Yulia. You understand that some are loved, some are just suffered, and so on. Okay, you don't give me 5 minutes, 4 minutes, and then you can switch off my mic, I think. Just a few words here. It's the view from the bottom. Actually, thank you very much, because we are the final ones in this discussion. So we are one of the largest regions, 6th place in population, 1.5 billion rubles, and we are growing all the time. It is very important to remember all these things, and it's very interesting because I don't have the slides because I want to be quick. The last 100 years, our country has been looking for the roots of success and have been trying to increase productivity. We looked at the history and we decided that the hugest leaps were after the revolution, Lenin and the electrification, and then Stalin, industrialization of the country, because they bought a lot of foreign-made equipment and so on. After the war, the Kosygin reform, over 2,000 major plants, and it was economic growth was 7% per year. We work with Rosatom very closely, 12 companies. The program has been created, and they have the drivers and incentives. We're running really very fast because, of course, we need to make money, both the region and the companies. So with 12 companies, we already have about 12 candidates for success. What are the demotivative factors in the companies? I visited a lot of enterprises in our major cities. The first question is, if you give us resources at 1% interest rate, we're going to sign up whatever, aluminum industry, atomic industry, others. Everyone is loyal to authorities. Everyone is loyal to the industries. The subcontractors are loyal, and so on. Training, everyone knows that it's great. But again, training should be free of charge. They say, yeah, training is excellent. So after Rosatom, we're going to build our center of competences after the ministerial letter. But again, we hope to have this mentor support from the experts of Rosatom. Of course, there are factors, and we talked to the business owners, to the managers of the companies, trust or not distrust to various programs, because first, there should be sufficient resources, and some of the measures are sort of half-financed only. Because, for instance, we have a plant which is really excellent, 2.5 billion investments. I talked to the director, and if Sergei, the director, didn't have money, but if he used only their own funds to re-equip the plant, then it would have been impossible, even to install the quality control system would have been impossible. So everyone knows how many organizations there are. We have 5 million organizations. If you look at the statistics, there are over 5,000 companies who are bringing added value to our industry, to our economy, and the resources are not enough. That's why we want some support from the government. We want to see really tangible resources. Otherwise, it will be just useless programs. Yeah. Do I still have time? Yes. I'm wrapping up. Of course, resources, training, that goes without saying, and large scope training. Some of the mentors from Rosarov, Severstal, and so on, they should be involved in some 5-year program. And this is really the issue, which is more valuable than money. They need to implement these training programs. This is the experience, invaluable experience, your experience, Japanese, Malaysian experience. This all is a driver of the increase of productivity. And also, what else do we need to do? It's the threshold of entrance. It's the opinion of the business. Lower the threshold. There should be new industries. There should be, for instance, the defense industry. They have, for instance, the weapons building companies. Very interesting. We need to think about it. Non-raw materials companies with large investments. I visit such a company in the city of, I went down to the mine, and that's a coal mine. Are they raw materials company or high-tech company? We need to, I'm wrapping up. Just patience, love, and of course, what Sergei mentioned, there is some passion for success. Thank you very much, and I think that we are switching from fear to trust and love. Nikolai, just 3 minutes, not more, as the Federal Center. How are you going to support the spread of new faith? You know, it's so interesting. I'm a well-prepared person, but the information is so extensive, and it's look from all the sides. At the beginning of the session, I think that we have covered all the questions and found answers, and I think that the first opinion was really very interesting. So what are the motivations? The revenue and the profit that has already been mentioned up front. If you don't have the ambitious indicators in mind, you are not going to increase productivity because you don't understand why. And most of our enterprises, I'm talking about the Federal Center of Competencies, I just want to find it. It's not only Rosatom, but this is the resource which allows the CEOs to see light. Everyone can be the owner of business. You don't need to know special instruments. You need to have only ambition. And if your target is to make profit, you'll be more successful. A lot of our clients don't understand it. What I'm doing, what they are doing, the CEOs, director generals, we're trying to show them some wonders of success. 2 months after the start, they say, my God, how did we used to work differently? They can produce 2 times more, even without any implementation, because you have inner resources. Because if you have funding, then you kill something internally. If you become a survivor, if you use inner resources, that's much better. We actually, and the duration of the process should be shortened, not only production process, but all other processes in the system.
increase of productivity, what is needed? Experts, professionals. Our major task is not to teach, but to train. Just studies of the basis of productivity system will bring no results. Because what we deal with are real projects and real production. And unless you deal with what can be touched and felt, you have no results. Now our stakeholders come to us and say, well, we can do the same. And finally, the culture of productivity. This is not about money. This is about the contribution of each and every person. A worker have to be inspired to come to work and to be useful there, to be useful for the company and for the country. This is what I understand under culture of productivity. Why do you value your workers? Why do you commend them? Why do you promote them? These are the factors that define your corporate culture. If you incorporate the idea of effective productivity in these factors, your company will be very successful. Thank you so much. I believe that we have heard an interesting opinion based on the latest studies of economic theory, which says that actually patience and money will ultimately increase productivity. And we have also talked about the tools that can be implemented in order to reach this goal. I will apologize for not taking questions from the audience, but we have next session upcoming. And I suggest that we should all now go to the coffee area, and there, in a less formal surrounding, we can exchange our opinions. Thank you so much for covering the issues of financing, incentives, motivations, enhancing productivity. I believe that they are all very important for us, and we will utilize them. Thank you. I believe this was an interesting discussion.